So we'll get started. I just wanted to remind everybody that we are recording this meeting because we want to be able to use it at different times in different groups throughout the conference if as needed. We will provide Irene, I'll ask Irene to provide a link to everybody in about a day once we get it up on the iCloud so that you can use it as well as you see fit within your organizations. So before we turn it over to Irene, I thought we would just real quick do some introductions and ask everybody to tell us who they are and where they're from so everybody here knows who everybody is. And I'm going to start with the top left corner of my screen, which says Rhonda. And you're on mute, Rhonda.
You missed my best joke. I'm Rhonda. I'm from New Covenant United Church of Christ in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. I run our Journey House program, which is a transitional living program for homeless families. And
I'm Pastor Brad, the pastor at New Covenant Williamsport.
Welcome. Josh.
Hey everyone, my name is Josh Blakesley. I'm here in Center City, Philly, and I'm the executive director of the Welcome Project PA, which also houses Love in Action United Church of Christ in the greater Philadelphia area.
Welcome. Irene.
I'm Irene Willis-Hassan. I'm the Minister for Refugee and Migration Services at UCC National with Team Global Hope. Thanks for inviting me to be with you all.
Welcome. Beth.
I'm Beth Mann. I'm a member of Salem Church and I'm part of the social action team.
Lorraine and Cynthia.
Hi, I'm Cynthia. That's my sister Laureen. We're also members of Salem Church. And I was talking to Michael about this and he said this was going on and invited us to join in. So I'd like to see what's happening and how we can help.
Welcome, you guys. Ginger.
Hi, I'm Ginger Hardwick, and I'm also a member at Salem Church.
Caroline.
I'm Caroline Dunleavy, and I'm a member at Salem as well, and I'm also a music minister in the Penn Southeast Conference, so I may know some of you through that as well. I think I see Reverend Blakesley on there. I know him from a long time ago.
Welcome. Dr. Larry.
Good evening, I'm Larry. I am a human rights scholar and theologian. I write for Stock Publishers. I'm also the senior pastor of Trinity UCC Church, historic Trinity in York, Pennsylvania.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Maria.
Hi, I'm Maria Yoakum. I'm the pastor of a different Salem church. I'm Salem UCC in Rohrerstown in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And my social justice committee is looking into the idea of doing some more work with refugees. So I'm looking forward to getting some information.
Welcome. And then Camille, are you there? Camilla?
Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry. I'm going to be going in and out. I do apologize. I have a 7-year-old that doesn't want to go to bed. So I am Camila Sansalon, and I'm also part of the Salem Church and a member of the Social Action Network.
Thank you. As you all figured out, I'm Mike Flanagan. I am the chair for the Social Action Network here at Salem Church in Doylestown. We got this meeting started because we asked one question of Irene, and she goes, "Will you host a meeting for us?" And we said, yes, we would be happy to. So I am going to stop sharing my beautiful slide, if I can figure, yes, and turn it over to Irene.
So I think you can just click the 3 buttons above my head and allow me to share. If you see that, that way you can retain host and I can just share, but do it however makes most sense to you.
Make host. There you go. You are now host.
Big responsibility right there. Okay, I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint for you guys. Let's see. So again, thanks for having me here, and thank you, Pastor Mike and Salem Church, for letting me crash your party here.
I am not the pastor.
Okay, Mr. Mike then. Good to know. So I appreciate you guys letting me do that. I've been doing these regional trainings all across the country. Today I did Colorado as well, and before that I did, Wisconsin, Ohio, Seattle, California. Anyway, the list goes on. We're doing these regional meetings all over the country because we have just been so grateful for all of the interest all over the country in this crisis that's going on with Afghan refugees and how we as the church can meet the needs, which are huge. So I really do appreciate you guys coming on. Community-centered organizations and churches are really vital to playing a part in what's happening, and I can try to help you figure out how to do it in Pennsylvania. I realize that you guys are sort of spread out all over Pennsylvania, and that Pennsylvania is a big state with 4 different conferences. I do acknowledge that. I pulled up the specific things from Pennsylvania that I'll talk about later to try to help, but basically we're going to want you guys to collaborate if and where possible, and I'll explain why. It is possible to do over such a wide distance. We have Wisconsin doing it. Wisconsin is also a large geographical area in which the churches are working together, and I'll explain how they're doing that. So maybe relevant to your situation out there. I have very little experience in Pennsylvania. I was explaining, my brother lives in State College. He's getting a master's degree from Penn State. So I will come visit at some point soon. Okay, so this is just a general information just to catch you up to date on refugee ministries in general, and in particular what's happening with the Afghanistan crisis and how it translates into the massive influx of refugees that is occurring in the United States right now. So in general, in normal refugee world, there are 2 types of refugees that come to the United States. The first one is UNHCR refugees. I'll give Syria as a classic example of how UNHCR processes refugees in the United States. So when the Syrian crisis started and war started, folks started getting into situations in which their lives were directly threatened. A bomb would go into their house, their brother would get publicly beheaded. And I'm sorry to use such wild language, but these are the facts of lives of refugees, is that in order to become a refugee or an asylum seeker in the United States, your life has to have been directly threatened. You have to be able to produce evidence that you're going to die by staying where you were. So they have fled wherever they've been, and they've gone into a secondary country. Usually, in fact, almost always, it's the country that's in the immediate radius of where their home country is. So again, using the example of Syrians, they fled into Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan. The world's largest refugee camp, it still is in northern Jordan. It looks like this. It's called El Zatari. I don't remember how many thousands of people live in El Zatari, but there's a lot. And so they usually stay in that situation, the secondary situation, for approximately 2 years while they're processed, which is a terrible situation to live in a tent city with COVID, with all your neighbors super close, everyone's traumatized. It's not very fun. So they stay there while they're processed for wherever their final destination is going to be, which is usually the countries that are surrounding the country in turmoil. So Jordan, in this example, 70% of the population of Jordan is refugees. So to give you perspective about how few refugees the United States takes in, it sounds a lot when we were told that the cap was increased to 125,000. That's nothing compared to countries like Jordan and Turkey. So they stay in that, this is the left column I'm talking about, refugees. So they stay in that camp for approximately 2 years. And if they have a US tie, meaning a friend or a family member, someone that can vouch for them that lives in the United States, they can connect with that family member, say that, and that family member can say, yes, this person can come live near me. And then the person that's in the refugee camp gets processed for a US visa called an I-94, which is a refugee visa. And they're resettled in the area near the friend or family member that they know. So say their aunt lives in Seattle, they're going to get sent to Seattle and processed through a refugee office in Seattle because they have a close family member there. So it turns out that oftentimes refugees have compartmentalization of communities throughout the United States. For example, in Minnesota, there are loads of Somalis. That's where the United States resettles Somalis because that's where their friends and family are. Afghans, most of the Afghans traditionally have been resettled in Sacramento, Dallas, and Northern Virginia. Those have been the traditional communities for Afghans that resettle in the United States. That is no longer true because of the situation. They're going everywhere, including Pennsylvania. So that's typical for a refugee process. Asylum seeker process is the other way to come. And again, you still need that what's called a credible threat claim, where you can show documented evidence that your life directly was in danger. It doesn't work to say my country's corrupt, there's an earthquake. These aren't reasons for becoming a legal refugee. You know, for example, we all saw the Haitian migrants at the border, and while that's a complex situation that involves racial justice and a long line of problems with the United States immigration process, the reason why they weren't allowed to enter is because they weren't able to produce some sort of credible threat saying that if they went back to Haiti, that someone was going to gouge out their eyes and throw their children in the ocean. Again, I'm sorry for using such strong language. This is the situation of the refugee. An asylum seeker comes to the border claiming that they have this credible threat claim. They get processed through a judge that judges whether or not that credible threat claim is real. And if they get granted, great, they get asylum status, which doesn't really mean anything except for they get to stay here. And then 6 months later, they can apply for an employment visa. And sometime after that, they're allowed to apply for the I-94, which again is the refugee visa. A refugee visa is stronger than an asylum visa because it allows them to get services such as case management, housing, employment, SNAP, which is food stamps, RCA and TANF, which are cash resources. They get an entire menu of options to be able to resettle for a 3 to 6 month period is how long a refugee office will work with an I-94 refugee. And so keep that 3 to 6 month time frame in mind, because that will be part of the ask that I'm making of you right now. So these are generally the two types of refugees that come to the United States. Most of the Afghans coming over are neither of these things. They are on something called humanitarian parole. Humanitarian parole is a very unused type of refugee status, but there are currently 50 to 100,000 parolees that are entering the United States right now. The low estimate is 50 and the high estimate is 100,000. And there's just thousands up to 1.5 million of these folks leaving Afghanistan right now and going all over the world, but many of them are coming to the United States because of the contract we made with Afghanistan over the last 20 years and them working with our US military. So a very small portion of the Afghans coming over are something called special immigrant visa. And that means that they worked with the US military as interpreters and as specialists, and in exchange for risking their lives and their families' lives by associating with the US military, they're granted this special visa, which is essentially a refugee visa. Now, most of these 50,000 folks coming over should have been eligible for this SIV visa, but because the crisis happened the way that it did, they weren't able to process all those people in time. And so now they are on this parole status, which gives them virtually nothing. So they come over, and right now they are all in military bases being vetted to make sure that they didn't bring over Taliban, ISIS, or disease. So they are being vaccinated for COVID. They're also being vaccinated for measles and other things, and being processed in a 1 to 2 month period that, again, normally takes 2 years. And then they're going to be let out into the community with $1,000 and an employment visa, if they're lucky, if they stay at the military bases long enough to receive these things. We are highly encouraging Afghans to stay on the military bases as long as possible to maximize the amount of benefits they can get. Since the process is so wildly unusual, there's actually never been anything that's happened like this before on this type of scale in the United States.
Can we ask a question?
Yeah, sure. What's up?
How long can they stay on the military base?
Well, so they're allowed to leave as soon as they've been vetted to make sure that they don't have any terrorism ties, that they have a credible threat. They still have to claim, they still have to be able to provide a credible threat, which most of them can. They have to be able to provide credible threat that makes sure that they're vetted, that they don't have any terrorism ties, and that they're fully vaccinated. And once they have those things, they're free to leave. But that's not in their best interest. We don't want them leaving right now, but they've been through a lot, and some of them just want to get out of there and figure out where to go.
So
right?
if they choose to stay, is there a time limit?
It's unclear. Don't know yet. So But they're probably going to be staying at the military bases maybe for the next 1 to 3 months. The prediction is that they'll probably have all been processed out, or at least the first wave will have been processed out by December. So Congress just passed a bill on last Thursday, that provides $6 billion worth of funding to make sure all these parolees have refugee status in the way that I described, in which they get all these benefits. But the problem is that, again, it takes 2 years just to process one person for that kind of status. It's going to be very hard to actually apply all of these benefits to each one of these individuals who has been processed incorrectly, that can leave anytime they like. It's kind of chaotic. So technically, they can eventually receive refugee benefits, but the process has been all messed up, and they might just be leaving with nothing. They might be leaving with refugee benefits. They might be leaving with $1,000. It's all over the place. It's very strange the way that this is happening, and happening in mass. So that's the situation about what's happening in Afghanistan, or with Afghan refugees coming over in a nutshell. If you want to learn more about Afghanistan and get much better up-to-date information than what I've shared in 10 minutes, I would go here to churchworldserviceglobal.org, CWS Global. They have all the updated information about the best knowledge that we have based on what the State Department tells us, which again is chaotic at best, but this is the best information that's available so far, is on this landing page at cwsglobal.org. So Afghans in particular, every refugee demographic has its own set of unique needs. Human beings are human beings, and we vary wildly across the board, but in general, Afghans often have very good English because many of them were interpreters for the US military. That was their jobs. Or at least one person in the family has very good English. And they often come with affluent careers, good jobs, advanced degrees. So you'll have doctors, lawyers, supply chain analysts, accountants, business managers, and they come over here to the United States, and they're told, your CPA doesn't work here, your MBA isn't valid here, you need to go get a job for $7 an hour as a janitor. And they say, I just risked my life and my family's life for your country, and you want me to be a janitor. So it's a mix of them being extremely grateful for being able to start over again, and also a lot of sorrow over losing a huge part of their identity. So that's a major need for Afghans, is to be able to train them by professionals who know how to help them get things like CPA licenses, how to transfer the skill sets they have using American licensure that they're not going to understand. This is something that Afghans overwhelmingly ask for, is they want to be able to translate their skills. That refugee offices won't help them with. They say, no, we got you the minimal job that we're supposed to get you, you're stable, good luck. So this is ways that churches in general can help Afghan and Iraqi populations, is help them get their specialized skills up to American standards, or not up to American standards, certified in the way that America recognizes, is the better way to put it. They're competent. And also the other thing is that they're in special circumstances in terms of their emotional and spiritual well-being, because normally, like I was talking about, there's 3 parts to a refugee process: the war that displaces them, the refugee camp they spend 2 years in, and then coming to the host culture, which shocks them because everything's completely different. The language is different, everything is different. They've skipped this middle part. There has been no refugee camp. So they've gone straight from war to host country. With, again, $1,000 and an employment visa. Good luck. And because the situation was so raw that happened in Afghanistan, if you do choose to work with an Afghan family, the first thing they're going to tell you, I promise, is, my mom is still hiding in a cave in the southern province of Afghanistan. Can you get her out? And the answer is no, we don't have any way to do that. Almost all of our partners, almost all of the American allies have been taken out of Afghanistan. It's black in there. We don't have any way of getting their families out, or at least it's very limited. We're still trying to work on it, but it's a stretch. So that's going to be the first thing they ask you for, is help getting mom, brother, cousin out of there. And you're not going to be able to do it. And it's going to be hard to take on that kind of secondary trauma, to be able to say, or to have to say, I can't fix that for you. So one thing we have at UCC National is we have access to a trained professional disaster chaplains and emotional and spiritual care that specializes in working with people that go through disaster. So if you find yourself, your heart is just so heavy from having that kind of conversation, we have resources that will support you and support the immigrants that you're working with. So this is just a general slide that I use. This part was written before everything changed. Basically, if you live 50 miles outside of a resettlement center, which would be Philadelphia, mainly Philadelphia, or Pittsburgh, or maybe Allentown. I'm not really sure how big that town is, but I've heard from one of your conference ministers, that's another big area. If you live within 50 miles of one of those resettlement areas, then we say, yes, please work on resettling a family. And if you don't, no, we'd rather you do advocacy or donate money. That is not the case anymore. We are, any church that's interested anywhere in resettling a refugee family, you are welcome to do so, and we have resources for you to do it. However, you do need to keep in mind these Afghan folks coming over are going to need access to mosques and transportation and cultural resources, halal food, that they may not be able to get out in what crops do you guys grow in Pennsylvania? Corn, like the cornfields? I don't know. Maybe it's not. So what you can do if you decide that you would like to resettle a refugee family is these are the different things that they're going to need. And normally a refugee office provides all of this. This is not the situation right now. Refugee offices are overwhelmed. There's too many of them preparing to come in with too little programmatic resources with them. But normally a refugee office would offer English tutoring, meeting them at the airport, finding them housing, paying for that housing for 3 to 6 months, navigating transportation, community orientation. For example, in Afghanistan, it's probably okay to smoke on a bus. Is it okay to smoke on a bus in Philadelphia? Not really. So learning things like this are an important part of community orientation that refugee offices normally do, and that churches normally help with. Job training, like I said, that's an extremely important part. The two most important needs are housing and jobs. And so helping someone find the career that they want is going to be the most impactful thing you can do for a human being that's coming out of the situation that Afghans are coming out of right now. Getting things like ID cards, getting kids enrolled into schools. There's just a whole host of things that need to happen for a refugee family to successfully resettle in the United States. Again, housing and jobs are the main two things. Statistically, refugees and immigrants succeed the best when they are placed into sustainable jobs that can pay them a living wage. This is true of anyone really, right? That can pay them a living wage that they can feel proud of, that they can carry into the future. There's lots of research on this, that when an immigrant is able to picture the path forward about how they're going to succeed in America, that's when they're able to contribute to society and thrive and be well for their family and future generations. So that's a big suggestion that I have for churches, is if you have professionals in any of the professions that refugees might have come from, helping them figure out how to do it in America is going to be a really big thing that you can do. So we ask that folks, if you decide to resettle a refugee family, you dedicate 3 to 6 months. And again, that's how long a refugee office would work with a family in order to get them on their feet. So that's the time frame that we're asking people to work with if they decide to make this commitment. If you are considering resettling a refugee family, we ask congregations to ask what gifts and resources you have to offer. And we're asking you to collaborate because the needs are enormous and the refugee offices don't have the capability to meet all of them by themselves, given the situation. So maybe there's a church in, sorry to catch everywhere where you guys are. Maybe there's a church in, say, Scranton that is able to offer, or no, wait. So think of it this way. So if you have a church that's close to Philadelphia, they're going to be the main point of contact because that's the closest resource to a city center. It's the closest resource to the refugee offices. And say that church can help do direct things like English and job training and transportation, but they're going to need help with maybe another church that's out in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, State College where my brother lives. I know that that's not close to very much anything. For example, if there's a church out in the middle of nowhere, they can partner with the church in Philadelphia and say, we'll pay 3 to 6 months rent. for an apartment, or we'll help you navigate how to enroll those kids in schools, or we'll donate winter clothes. You could partner with a church in the radius that way, or 2 or 3 churches within a radius can partner together to provide things like English services and child enrollment in schools, childcare programs. Every church has a different gift to offer, right? We all have things that we're good at. And if we put all those things together, then we can successfully resettle a family. And I know perhaps you guys are geographically far apart, but you can do it together. And I'll explain the way that we can offer to help you do it together. Also, as I talked about, how's your demographics affect how refugees are resettled in your area? Is it safe to resettle a refugee out in the middle of nowhere where they don't have access to their cultural resources? And then what risks am I taking? Are my neighbors going to be upset? Are they going to graffiti my church? This particular situation, across the board, folks support Afghans coming to the United States because it's widely understood that they support the US military, and that's why they're here. But it could happen, is some of your neighbors could get mad at you for bringing around, a bunch of foreigners and taking their jobs or whatever it is. I worked for a refugee office in Seattle, and our church got graffitied often. Or our office which was in the church, got graffitied often. Also, COVID-19, that's still real. We're still in the middle of a pandemic. Every time you engage with someone in person, you're at risk. All these folks that are, all the Afghans coming over are being vaccinated for COVID-19, but you're always taking a risk. But of course, you also want to ask yourself, what rewards and outcomes is possible from doing this resettlement work? And let me tell you, the churches that I've worked with that have done the resettlement work, that have become sanctuary churches, that have worked with immigrants and refugees, it changes your church. It changes the life of your church for the positive. Because walking with someone when they're on that transformative journey, that's the work of God. And that's why I am in this position doing what I'm doing and talking with all of you, is because this is important work. It will change your life, and it will help the person that you're working with as well. Basically it's one of the, in my opinion, it's one of the best things that a church can do is help a refugee family. And you'll find that they'll help you too, right? That, they have tremendous gifts and livelihood to offer, and stories and wellness and hope that a lot of us haven't experienced. It's just an incredible experience. There are definite rewards to take away from doing this intense work. So like I said, the best case scenario for this situation, in which the needs are huge, refugee offices probably aren't going to be able to handle all of it by themselves, and churches certainly can't handle it all by ourselves, not one church by itself. Because if a refugee office can't handle all those resources, how much harder it would be for one church to do it alone, is we're asking you guys to collaborate with each other to combine resources. And we ask you to identify what we call a partner in service. We have a program in which we could train you, give you a title, because refugee offices are going to respond more to a trained, educated person with a title than they would be to 100 volunteers coming at them. Because that's another part that is creating a problem right now, is that not only are refugee offices overwhelmed with the amount of refugees coming in, they're overwhelmed with the amount of volunteers calling them, wanting to be trained to work with the refugees. And while it's understood that volunteers mean well and they want to help, refugee offices don't have the capacity both to train the volunteers and to work with the refugees. So if you've tried reaching out to a refugee office and they haven't gotten back to you, that's what's going on, is that they're overwhelmed and they aren't sure whether trying to train volunteers is going to hinder or help what they're doing. So if you come to a refugee office in Philadelphia or Pittsburgh or Allentown and you say, we are able to offer, we have a house they can rent for 3 to 6 months. We can offer job training on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 3 to 6 p.m. We can offer English training around the same time. We will help the children get enrolled in their schools. In fact, we have a children's program that we can offer to have childcare once or twice a week, and to help those kids get engaged with their neighborhood. Whatever gifts it is that you offer, if you guys work together and you say, we can offer this, that, and this, and then this one point person who knows all those churches and all those things that are offered and knows the refugee office says, these are what we offer, the refugee office will say, great, we're so glad that you have your ducks in a row, and that they'll work with you. They're much more likely to work with you if you are trained and coordinated already. You can also apply for funding from us at UCC National. I'll drop a grant application in the chat box. I'll drop all these links in the chat box. And you could apply for projects such as remodeling your church in order to make room. It sounds like some of you guys already have churches that might have something like this, an area in which you can provide temporary housing while the refugee offices try to find permanent housing. So say you wanted to remodel to add a shower and a kitchen and a kitchenette and a washing machine so that someone could stay there for 3 to 6 months. You could apply for funding from us for that. Or if you wanted to do a job training center in your church offices by providing computers so that refugees could come and look for jobs or do English training, you could apply for funding for that. If you have a project that you guys want to put together, you could apply for funding, and we would definitely consider it. And yeah, like I said, if you want to contact your local refugee office, my best recommendation is to have a collaborative plan prepared already before you contact them. I will also provide you what refugee offices you have and which ones I recommend that you talk to based on relationships that we have going already. Yeah, so I already let you know what we can offer at National, which is basically disaster support for trauma, partners in service, which will establish training, a title. We can even offer a small stipend to someone that's willing to act as a point person and take their time to do so. To dedicate several hours a week to coordinating your churches. We have a stipend we could offer for that. And then the possibility of awarded grants. And that's what we have to offer. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing that and then tell you a little bit about your local resources. So there is, let me see if I can just share the screen for my, yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna share my browser. All right, here's my browser. Here's all the different resources. Again, I'll drop these links in the chat, but I just want you to get a visual of what these things look like. So this is the Office of Refugee Resettlement map. Okay, wow, why is it green? That's new. Why is it green? Interesting, that's brand new. It's not important why I think that's interesting. Well, it kind of is. The reason this didn't used to be green. This used as of a couple hours ago, because I just did this training for Colorado like maybe 3 hours ago. Is this used to be all different colors based on area and demographics. But it looks like they've changed it all to green because they understand the situation's different and they're trying to make it across the board. So it's very interesting to see that. So if you were to click on Pennsylvania, it pulls up all of your local refugee offices. And it looks like they've even updated it just because so many people are looking at it right now. So again, in Allentown, I know that I talked to the conference minister, Bonnie Bates, who I think this is West Pennsylvania, Bethany Christian Services. I know that you guys might already have a relationship with them. And then let's see, the one that we recommend, you could contact any of these after you guys have created a collaborative plan, but the one that we always recommend is going to be CWS. So CWS is our partner at the UCC. We have an active membership with Church World Service. They will already know who you are if you contact them, and they will be willing to work with you. In fact, they'll work with you remotely, even if you aren't in their area. And that page looks like this. Again, I'll drop this stuff into the chat. So you can sign up with Church World Service, even if you're not in Lancaster, and you can press on this page, which is Welcoming Afghans, and you go to the bottom. Oh, and then if you fill out this form, they'll contact you and they'll help you remotely resettle refugees in your area and give you resources to do so. So that's another point that I recommend. But if you can make a contact with your local refugee office, if you are in, say, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Lancaster, Erie, or Allentown, go make those points of contact first. It's better to have someone in person, right? But if they are overwhelmed and not able to work with you, your next best resource is this other one. Whoops, closed it, my bad. Anyway, I was basically done showing you that. Is Church World Service, which I'll drop in the chat, which can help you resettle remotely. Yeah, Okay, so that's the information I have for Pennsylvania, is that we want you guys to collaborate together on this because the need is so massive. There's going to be just thousands of refugees coming in, going anywhere. And that I recommend that you contact any of those local offices on that map, and I'll send you the links to that in a follow-up email. And if they can't work with you, even after you've created a collaborative because they're just overwhelmed, then you contact Church World Service and they'll help you resettle remotely. And if you need resources for anything, you can contact UCC National. And you know, I'm a what do you call it? Subject matter expert. I know a lot about refugee resettlement. I've worked in refugee resettlement for the last 10 years. So I can always walk it through it with you also. So yeah, anyway, I just wanted to give you guys time to talk amongst each other, ask questions, figure out if it even is a possibility for you guys to work together, and if not, how to go it alone. So I'll leave it there, and thank you for your time.
Let's open it up for questions. Anybody have questions, comments, thoughts? Go ahead, Lorraine. Just take yourself off mute.
Hi. I had been recently searching about Airbnb, and I came up with a lot of companies. Airbnb is offering their homes listed, and they're going to pay for homes. And then also I saw Verizon, Walmart, who else? And the Uber CEO, they're offering monies and other services. Do we know exactly, is it being used? Have people taken advantage of those monies yet? And how do they get dispersed?
That's awesome that you know that. So yeah, I forgot to mention Airbnb. I don't know about the other ones. That could very possibly be true. I would not doubt that at all. But I do definitely know that if you contact Airbnb, what I would do if you contacted Airbnb and asked, can I host a refugee family in one of your Airbnbs, is the person you probably want to talk to is going to be corporate social responsibility. Corporate social responsibility. That the person that's in that department is usually the one that deals with matters like this. Airbnb is certainly doing that. So if you contact them, that's the point of contact I would ask for.
Have you heard of anybody using these monies from these different companies like Verizon or Uber? Like they claim they've set aside, you know, a million, Uber CEO said he set aside $1 million. Another company, LIRS, they raised 1.8 million. It's like you always hear, you know, during disasters or whatever, people raising money, but has it gotten to people who could use it?
So LIRS stands for Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services. You guys don't have LIRS, it looks like, on your map. So that's probably irrelevant to you. There's 9 resettlement agencies, that's one of them. But so as far as utilizing this money, not many Afghans have come off the military bases yet. We're preparing for that to happen in the coming months. There will be a massive influx of them coming, but it's going to probably be either slow leaks or very sudden like spouts, and I don't know how to compare this to plumbing, but you know what I'm saying? Like they're slowly coming off the military bases right now, but they'll be coming slowly over the course of the next couple of months, but we don't know if it's going to happen in chunks or how fast, but it's estimated that about 50,000 before December are going to be coming out. But not a whole lot have come out so far. So we're still preparing. I don't know anyone who's actually used Airbnb yet. You are welcome to try it out and let us know what happens.
Also, one other quick thing, you know, when you have mixed people who feel differently about the immigrants coming in. I know other immigrants, when they have gotten to Europe, you heard stories about how it devastated some of the countries, that the amount of refugees that were there, you know, it costs money to help them, to feed them, to house, educate, all that, that some countries are really feeling that financial pinch. What do you say to people to help them understand that this is the right thing to do and it is manageable for the United States?
Thank you. That's a really good point. So this is actually a very small number. Like I said, compared to what happened in Syria between 2013 and now, the massive amount of, so most of the migration happening in the world is coming from North Africa and the Middle East. You know, we all hear about the southern border because that's close to us. But most of the immigration happening in the world is coming out of North Africa and the Middle East. And the closest stable countries to that area is Europe. So they get on boats and head over to Europe. So that was another situation in which there was massive amounts of people coming all at once, which is similar to what we're facing now. But the difference is that the folks that are coming over from Afghanistan, like I said, we sort of put them in the situation that they're in because of this 20-year war that, they didn't volunteer for us to come over and do for them. So that's the difference, is that we have made a contractual obligation with Afghanistan to bring them over, and we just sort of fouled up the process of doing so. But hopefully it won't turn into a situation that happened in Europe, in which there's suddenly migrants coming all the time. Germany and Greece and Italy did not have any such contract with any of the countries in North Africa or the Middle East to invite them in. So I think it kind of blindsided them that happened. This doesn't have to blindside us. We can prepare. So I would say that's the difference. But time will tell, right? But better to be prepared than not.
Okay, thank you.
So are the majority of the refugees in this area at McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey?
No, Fort Dix in New Jersey is taking in a lot of refugees. Another area that's close to you that's taking in loads of refugees right now is Fort Atterbury. Carl Jones, who's your local CDC, corrected me. I know that they all flew into Philadelphia. I don't know how many are actually at Letterkenny. I know there's some, but the big ones are Fort Dix and Fort Atterbury.
And what would you say are the first steps for people to start organizing?
I would say pick a point of contact. Have conversations like you're having right now. Figure out if you guys are able to work together, what resources everyone has, and then pick a point of contact who is going to liaise with us at National and the Refugee Resettlement offices in your area. Or you don't even have to talk to me again if you don't want to, but I'm just saying, if you guys want more resources from us, having one point of contact is better, because like most refugee people, my email is bonkers right now, just hundreds of emails. And that's true of all refugee people. So if you have one point of contact that says I can offer all these things, that's what I would do first, is I would figure out what resources all you guys have together, and then pick that one person to convey those resources to the professionals. And focusing on housing and jobs. Yeah.
Irene, a number of us are from Salem Church in Doylestown, which is a nice small town. But we're not a big city. We're maybe 40 miles from Allentown and maybe 45, 50 miles from Philadelphia. In your experience, I'm excited about the idea of possibly hosting a family, but in your experience, is that not in the best interest of the families to be in a smaller community?
Necessarily. I think that works just fine. So, I worked in refugee resettlement in Seattle. Just give you some of my background. I graduated seminary in 2013, and during seminary, I kind of got into a situation where I ended up working for a nonprofit in Syria that was helping develop schools for Syrian children to learn how to play. So after seminary, I ended up working in Jordan, helping build schools for Syrian and Iraqi refugee children. And then after that, I came back to America and I worked in Episcopal Migration Ministries, which is one of the 9 resettlement offices in Seattle. And then I did that for a few years, and then went on to Hawaii for a couple of years, where I coordinated churches to work on the homelessness problem there. And then I came into this position in August, right before the fall of Kabul. And I'm happy to be here, but just my point is that in Seattle, so most of the offices were in Seattle, the refugee offices, but Seattle's too expensive to actually resettle refugees in. So we would resettle them in an area called Kent, Auburn, Puyallup, which is about 30, 40 miles south of Seattle. And that's done on purpose because the cost of living is more attainable there. Mm-hmm. So my guess is, is it a diverse community or is it just like a bunch of white folks hanging out there?
It's a lot of white folks. Very nice white folks, but it's not, not as going to be as diverse as Philadelphia, for example.
I think it's a real interesting question, Ginger, because
Yeah.
I think it also brings into play the thought process that we all would have to have around transportation, for instance.
Mhm.
You know, if you're in a suburban community like this, the transportation needs are much greater than when you have public transportation.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, one thing you could do. Sorry, Josh, you've had your hand up for a long time.
Oh.
What's your question?
Oh, yeah, hi.
He's volunteering to lead us.
Yeah. I first want to just welcome you to the national staff, Irene. I'm glad you're in this position. And what a time to start out. But welcome. So glad you're doing this work. I just wanted to say to everybody, my congregation and our nonprofit a few years ago helped resettle a few families from Syria when all that craziness was happening. Our church is not located in Philadelphia, but we're in a suburb. But I can say that if anyone wants to know specifics of what that entails, I mean, basically, I don't want to, waste everybody's time right now, but I'd be glad to give specifics of what that looked like for us. We did resettle families right near our church in their own apartments and places, help them get jobs, drove them to doctor's appointments, got them English for those who needed to learn English, got them English, supported their local businesses, which they ended up opening a restaurant and a hookah lounge in our neighborhood. Patronize those things, simple things like that that make a huge difference. And just for like basically 3 years, just tried to help them integrate into the community. Their kids were going to school with our kids, and all that. And so really, it's a full-time job. We partnered with a couple of synagogues, a couple of mosques and Islamic centers, and about 5 other churches. We pooled money together. We applied for as many grants as we could get our hands on. And then we just, scheduled people to do stuff. And it lasted 3 years. And they're all settled now. And now we don't hear from them too much, which is good news, because that means, they're just like everybody else right now. But it's a lot of work. So the first thing that I would say is, Irene said it really well, but just know what your limitations are, and also know what you can actually offer, and realize that there's no way your church can do it. You have to partner with a lot of people. Right now, I also say this, right now we are partnering with HSPA, which is a Jewish organization that is involved in the resettlement. So that's another organization that is really good and is willing to work with other faith communities to, do this. And then what else did I want to say? Irene, I think you said you were going to do it, but I would love to know more about the UCC national grant programs for this too, because our nonprofit, that's not the church, does have eligibility for certain grants that churches can't get. So that's another avenue to explore, is like some churches don't do grant writing, but thanks. But those of us who work with other 501(c)(3)s that are able to get, grants for this, that's another partnership that's important. And our church is also working with, we have immigration law that we host on site. So we do have 2 dedicated lawyers from Philadelphia that do pro bono and sliding scale. So that's another thing that we offer the Syrian families, because as Irene said very well, the first question that you'll get is, hey, I have an uncle who's stuck in Damascus, can you get him here? And the answer is first no, unless we do have access to immigration law that can look at casework and all that kind of thing. So anyway, just thought I'd offer that. And once again, thanks Irene for doing this, and thanks to Salem for hosting this.
Josh, can you speak, or Irene, my sister in her church 40 years ago hosted a lot of the Asian refugees that came in. And I know one of the biggest challenges that they faced was the long-term needs, and them constantly coming back and needing stuff more than 3 and 5 years. I mean, 20 years later, they're still dependent, on people. So how did you successfully, and how do you successfully get them independent?
Job training. Finding ways to make sure that they're developing their careers in Americana fashion.
Yep, exactly. Like that's why I mentioned the business that they opened, the restaurant, the hookah lounge. Another one of them opened up a catering business, and so we helped market it. And they had amazing food that they could cater events for, and that's how it started. And I mean, it's that simple.
A lot of types of refugees love small business models. At the refugee office I worked for, we actually had an incentive program where if they took the cruddy janitor job for 6 months and they saved some money, we would match them the amount of money they saved and train them about how to open up their own business. So it was an incentive program for them to open up a business because that's what they like doing, is being in control of their own business. Because that's a lot of the economy of the Middle East and North Africa. So that's awesome that you guys helped them open a hookah lounge. Afghanistan might be a little different. That's not a small business economy. The economy was based on the US military. And now as we see, the economy is based on nothing. So they're already focused on the American strategy of money making and getting an affluent career with a salary and benefits and so forth. But the problem is that their titles don't work over here. So
another thing that was helpful for us was to partner with local elected officials. So whoever your representatives, senators, congresspeople, because their offices can be another strong resource for our communities to help, but also they can host informational sessions that really get out to the right people so that we can all, basically what I'm saying is it takes the whole village to do it. So when you have elected officials behind it as well, they have resources not available to you. So then you get the whole village. And that's kind of what we found in Willow Grove, Hatboro, which is where our church is located, that once we got all those folks behind it, it was just a lot more people at the table to help and a lot more money that came to the table as well.
So Ginger, before we move on to Caroline's question, to answer your question about are we too remote, that's something that you and your church have to work out through discernment. Is imagine that you're a Muslim who needs halal meat. Are you going to be able to have access to those things? But also, do you have the ability to find them good jobs and stable housing in the area? It might be good to resettle them there if they can get good jobs and stable housing, because good jobs and stable housing in an area 40 miles outside of Allenstown is better than being homeless in the middle of Philadelphia.
Another suggestion, it depends, like you talk about licenses that are eligible in the United States, depending on the age of the person, because I'm a retired nurse, and we had a lot of people coming over, whether it was Russia, the Philippines. If you could partner, depending on the age of the person, you could partner also with local colleges, universities to get them into programs so that they can get qualified to become doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists, whatever their training was there.
That's right. That's really, yeah, that's a good idea. I talked to the University of Scranton yesterday. They weren't able to make it this call, but the University of Scranton is down for doing that if you guys want to work with them.
Even if some of them, I'm sure, were farmers and stuff, and we got a lot of farmland here, if they're interested in doing that type of work, because the United States farmers, they're aging out. They're in their 50s and 60s, and we're in desperate need of farmers in this country. So that's another great opportunity, possibly.
All right, Caroline, sorry to keep you waiting. What's up?
No, I was just going to say that I work in Philadelphia, but I don't have a lot of experience with this issue because I work in urban poverty, which is a more domestic type situations. But the organization that Josh mentioned, I do know that's being recommended as one local organization, HIAS, yes, for resettlement here. And then the other thing I just thought about, our conference, Penn Southeast, they have a grant program that comes around every 6 months. It'll be coming around again for January. I mean, I don't know if we could ever collaborate and get a grant through them to help with anything, but it's a thought. I sit on budget and finance, and you'd be surprised. A lot of times nobody even applies for it. To the point of the woman who was talking before. I mean, so it might be something we could do.
Yeah, we actually received that grant money prior. So it's a great point, Carolyn. It's definitely something that's not even used. People are not really applying for it. And both national and conference levels. So I think that's a good point.
Okay, well, I probably have to go soon. I do have 2 small children that need to be put to bed. And as someone else mentioned, that they are in a similar situation at this point in the evening. Are there any last questions before I take off? Dr. Coven, did you have a question?
Yes, good evening. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for your presentation. My question basically was, I understand that since 1980, there's been a significant number of Afghans that have migrated to the United States. My question is, those who have been here for several decades, how do they engage with the new influx of refugees? What is their relationship? How do they engage these new settlers? So I'd like to hear if you could speak to that, please.
Yeah, so I mean, that's where most of these folks coming off the military bases are going to be going, is to their friends who are in their family who have already been settled here for the last 5, 10, 20 years.
Yeah, I'm sorry, not necessarily family members, but as a community.
Right, so they'll be looking for those communities, which is why when I got in the Northern California call, I was basically begging the Northern California churches to work together, because Afghans have traditionally resettled in Sacramento, which is a terrible place to try to put new people because the cost of living and fires and so forth. But that's where the Afghan community is. So that's where probably a lot of them are going to go. So yeah, I mean, I hope they answer your question. They'll be looking for you.
By and large, they've been open and receptive and helpful.
Yeah, yes.
Great, thank you.
So most of the people I think everybody that was on here or is on here that responded is from this general area and this conference. So I think if we all kind of take away what Irene has covered with us, and if there's someone that would like to kind of lead us as a group, it certainly sounds like there's enough interest here to do something. We just need to get up and go.
Well, discern and spend time praying together and getting ready, right? And like I said, if a refugee office doesn't respond to you because their brains are exploding, Dr. Coven's point is very good, is if you get yourselves organized and know what you can offer, you can go to your local mosque, you can go to your local Afghan restaurant and say, if you have 2 to 3 families that you need help with, we can offer XYZ. And that Afghan restaurant will probably say, cool. So, but you have to know what you're offering. You can't just walk up and say, we want to help you. They'll be like, yeah, we want to be helped. How can you help? I don't know. Right, so be prepared is what I'm saying. That's my request of you. Okay.
Well, thank you everyone for joining. Anybody else have any? Josh, did you have something?
I was just going to say, I mean, I have a meeting, another meeting with HISPA on Monday. So I'm glad to, reach out, whether it's sending an email maybe to you and you can send it to the group or whatever, give an update on where we are in that, process, and because we're fully planning on doing a similar thing what we did for the Syrian families, just because we have a church, but we also have a nonprofit that's set up to do some of these things, and a volunteer base of people that we already have. So I'm glad to be a point person in that regard if anyone wants to get involved in that, and I, again, share all the information that I know as I get it.
So does anybody have an objection if I share everybody's emails with Josh?
I promise I won't spam you.
Great. Josh, I'll shoot you the contact sheet for everybody.
Great.
Awesome. This sounds great. Thank you, Josh, for stepping into that role. Thank you to all of you for being willing to get on this call and start envisioning what you guys can do together. If you do want to have a second conversation all together and you want me to come, I'd be happy to do so. I am doing follow-up conversations with several other conferences as well. So it's no skin off my back to do that. I would be happy to help you in any way that I can. And thank you for letting me crash your party. I know Mike was just like, can you answer this question? And I said, I'm coming.
We love it. We like it. Thank you so much for doing this for us. It was a great level set for all of us. So again, we did record this. We will get it out to everybody as soon as we can, just so you can use it within your own groups. And Josh, thank you. And I'll get you that information.
Yeah, I wanted to just say real quick, Josh, you're not far from us, right?
No.
I think you're in Hatboro or somewhere, right?
Yeah, it's not far.
Yeah, it's not far. Thank you.
That's why I was saying Doylestown. I mean, it's just the cost of living, you know.
Yeah.
It is very much.
Yeah.
Okay, I switched the host back to you, Mike. And again, I appreciate it. I'm signing off, but I'll be in touch with you guys soon, and I'll send you the links in a follow-up email.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And Josh, thank you. I'll get you that information.
No worries. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.